Mr. Reeder, how long have you worked at the EPA?
Press that button.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, 27 years.
So between the two of you, you've got about 60 years of experience at the EPA. We thank you for your service, but I don't understand with Mr. Peter Jutro, there were 13 times that women had reported matters to the EPA about some form of sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, and yet it took more than 13 times before you got serious about it. And then it finally percolated to the point where you were going to actually pursue it, and then he just retires. Because he was in his 70s, correct?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know his age.
Okay, he's roughly 70 years old, that is my understanding. But why does it take 13 times before you all get serious about it? That's what's so infuriating. Two of these incidents of the sexual misconduct happened at the White House. At the White House. So how does that, who wants to answer that question? Why does it take so long?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know where that comes from, and
the Inspector General.
Maybe the Inspector General is in a better position to answer the question about the incidences, because I believe many of those were discovered in their investigation and were not raised to management.
Mr. Elkins, Mr. Sullivan, my understanding is that 13 times these matters had been reported to EPA management.
Yes, it was reported to most cases to the victim's immediate supervisor. In most of the cases, not every case. Some of the victims came forward during our investigation, but at least one of the incidents at the White House was reported immediately during the alleged sexual harassment and inappropriate conduct by Mr. Jutro. The victim immediately communicated with her supervisor what Mr. Jutro had done.
And that happened in 2009, 2010, something like that?
The last incident happened on or about July 29th, 2014.
But the one that was one of the ones at the White House that was reported, at least according to what I've got written here, is back in 2009, 2010.
Yes, and then the second one happened in July of 2014.
I need you to help I don't understand why somebody has to ever tolerate this and then tolerate such mismanagement that you don't deal with it. That's the serious, I mean, these people are promoted. Go ahead, Mr. Reeder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The way the sexual harassment policy works at the agency is if an employee complains about behavior, they would report that behavior to the supervisor. In most instances, those don't become formal cases, and the supervisor is obligated, and I hope they've done this, but the supervisor is obligated to take some action to either end the behavior or, if it's more serious, to conduct a more formal review and investigation. I cannot answer for the supervisors that may have been involved with Dr. Jutro over the course of his career. I'm going to
okay, our time is limited here.
So
hold on. Under your policy, sexual harassment, first offense is either written reprimand or up to removal. Second offense is a 14-day suspension to removal. There was more than two of those. There were more than two of those, and that didn't happen. And on the third offense, 30-day suspension to removal. Why didn't you follow your own policy in this? This person ultimately got promoted.
I can't answer the question about what happened in those instances before he came to the Office of the Administrator. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, let me just speak to a couple of things. Since the incident that led to the Inspector General investigation occurred before I came back to the agency, I can't really speak to that. But I will say that the issues that were uncovered in the Inspector General investigation were a result of the agencies asking the Inspector General to do the investigation following the behaviors that occurred with the Smithsonian intern. And we appreciate
But do you dispute the idea that 13 times women reported to somebody in management that this was a problem and this person was getting promoted along the way? You've got bonuses.
Where I was going with this was simply to thank the Inspector General.
Oh, well, that's not an answer. I don't want to thank the Inspector. I want you to do your job. I want you to fire these people who are sexually harassing people at work. I want you to fire. I want you to live up to the obligation that you put out in your own manuals. That did not happen in this case. Do you dispute that?
What I don't dispute is that that kind of behavior was appalling and is intolerable.
You can say that, but then there's no consequence and the guy gets promoted. It makes the situation worse. Would you disagree with that?
Mr. Chairman, again, in the specific case of Mr. Utro, the fact that the Inspector General was able to help in identifying things that had not otherwise come to light was useful, and I think contributed and backed up the swift action that was taken once we got
Swift action?
Yes.
Where do you think you had swift action?
When the report came from the Smithsonian.
When's the first time a woman stepped up and said, this guy's harassing me? When was that time?
When the agency got the information from the Smithsonian intern, they acted immediately, contacted the Inspector General, took his badge, barred him from the building, and he never came back.
Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Elkins, to say that this suggests that they acted swiftly upon the first time, you shouldn't have to have the Inspector General go through this. Management should be able to deal with this immediately. And according to your own policy, that's what's supposed to happen. But that's not what's happening at the EPA. Mr. Elkins or Mr. Sullivan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding of the facts that members of the Administrator's Office had noticed that Mr. Utro had some suspect conduct in the past. That information was information that they had prior to Mr. Utro actually being assigned to have the acting position as the Associate Administrator of OHS. None of that information was provided to us prior to the incident with the intern. Mr. Sullivan may be able to give you a little bit more details.
Mr. Chairman, yes. On or about February 20th of 2014, when Mr. Utro was being vetted for the position, the then Deputy Administrator, Mr. Perciasepi, asked the acting Associate Deputy Administrator, Ms. Felt, to speak to Mr. Utro. During that discussion, Mr. Utro exhibited offensive behavior to Ms. Felt that she thought was completely inappropriate based on his comments. The next day, a senior executive who's a victim that we reported in our report of investigation reported to Ms. Felt with great specificity some of Mr. Utro's prior behavior. Ms. Felt told us she then took that information from the victim, who was a senior executive, and reported back to Mr. Perciasepi and other senior executives in the Office of the Administrator, urging them not to appoint him to the position of acting Associate Administrator.
And what happened?
Nothing. He was appointed. And they did some subsequent vetting, but we're not quite sure exactly what that vetting was.